Sometimes the most dangerous predators walk on two legs, and sometimes salvation comes from the most unlikely places. In the deep woods where shadows hide both monsters and miracles, a young girl would learn that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about finding someone willing to stand between you and the darkness, even when they don't know your name. What would you do if you found a terrified child hiding in the wilderness, bruised and broken, with eyes that held secrets too heavy for someone so young? Would you walk away, or would you become their shield against a world that had already failed them once? This is the story of Sarah Chun, age 12, and Marcus Rodriguez, a man who went hunting for deer, but found something far more precious and far more dangerous to protect. The morning mist clung to the forest floor like secrets waiting to be discovered. Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his hunting rifle and stepped carefully through the undergrowth, his boots making soft, crunching sounds on the fallen leaves. He had been coming to these woods for 15 years, ever since his divorce, when the silence of his empty apartment became too loud to bear. Here, among the towering pines and ancient oaks, he found the peace that had eluded him in the city. At 52, Marcus was a man who preferred the company of trees to people. His weathered hands spoke of years working construction, and his patient brown eyes had learned to spot movement in the shadows long before his prey knew he was there. This morning felt different, though. The usual sounds of the forest seemed muted, as if nature itself was holding its breath. The fallen log den had been there for as long as Marcus could remember. A massive oak had toppled years ago during a severe storm, creating a natural shelter where its thick trunk had landed against a cluster of boulders. Over time, smaller branches and debris had gathered around it, forming a hidden, cave-like space that local wildlife often used for shelter. Marcus had always respected it as nature's sanctuary and had never disturbed it. But today something was wrong. As he approached his usual hunting spot, Marcus noticed fresh disturbances in the earth around the fallen log. Small footprints, human footprints, pressed into the soft soil. His heart quickened as he realized these weren't the boots of another hunter. These were the bare feet of a child. Marcus set down his rifle and approached slowly, the way he would approach any frightened animal. "Hello," he called out softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Is someone there?" The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Then, from deep within the log den, came the faintest sound, a sharp intake of breath, quickly stifled. "I'm not going to hurt you," Marcus said, crouching down to make himself appear less threatening. "My name is Marcus. I just want to help." Still nothing. But he could sense movement now, the subtle shifting of someone trying to press themselves deeper into hiding. Marcus pulled off his orange hunting vest and set it aside, knowing the bright color might be frightening. He sat down cross-legged on the forest floor, settling into wait. "I come here every weekend," he said conversationally, as if talking to the trees themselves. "Been hunting these woods for 15 years. Never hurt anything that didn't want to be hunted. Never hurt a person in my life." Minutes passed. A squirrel chattered overhead, scolding them both for disturbing the morning quiet. Marcus found himself studying the log den more carefully, noticing details he had missed before. Someone had been living here, not just hiding, but actually surviving in this makeshift shelter. There were signs of a small fire pit, carefully concealed. Strips of bark had been arranged to create better insulation. This wasn't the work of someone who had just gotten lost on a camping trip. "Are you hungry?" Marcus asked, reaching slowly into his backpack. He always carried extra food on his hunting trips, old habits from his construction days, when lunch might be the only meal he could count on. "I've got some sandwiches. My sister Rosa makes them for me." She puts too much mustard on them, but they're not bad. This time, he heard movement. Not retreat, but a cautious shifting forward. Someone was listening. I've got water too, he continued, setting a water bottle on the ground between himself and the log den. Clean water. Not from a stream. More movement, and then Marcus saw them, two dark eyes peering out from the shadows within the fallen log. Child's eyes, wide with fear and exhaustion. The face that followed was thin and dirty, framed by tangled black hair. A girl, maybe 12 years old, wearing what had once been a yellow t-shirt and jeans, both now torn and stained with mud, and worse things Marcus didn't want to think about. But it was the bruises that made his stomach clench. Dark purple marks on her arms, a healing cut on her cheek, and the way she held herself, like someone who had learned to expect pain from the adults in her life. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, the way his sister Rosa talked to frightened animals at the veterinary clinic where she worked. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The girl stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether he was another threat or possibly, maybe, someone different. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible, scratched, and hoarse from days of limited water and probably too much crying. "Sarah," she whispered. Then, with visible effort, she added Sarah Chun. "Sarah Chun," Marcus repeated, making sure to pronounce it correctly. "That's a pretty name. How long have you been out here, Sarah?" She held up 4 fingers, then seemed to reconsider and added her thumb. 5 days. 5 days of a 12-year-old surviving alone in the wilderness. Marcus felt a mixture of amazement at her resilience and horror at whatever had driven her to choose the forest over whatever home she had left behind. "That's a long time to be camping," Marcus said carefully. "Must have been scary at night." Sarah nodded, and Marcus saw her bottom lip tremble slightly before she pressed her mouth into a hard line. This was a child who had learned not to cry, probably the hard way. "Are you hurt?" he asked, though he could already see some of the answer written on her visible skin. Sarah shook her head quickly, too quickly, the response of someone who had been taught that admitting pain only brought more pain. Marcus made a decision. Slowly, telegraphing his movements, he stood up and walked to a fallen branch about 10 feet away. He sat down on it, creating more distance between them while still remaining in conversation range. "I'm going to tell you something, Sarah," he said, looking out into the forest rather than directly at her. "When I was about your age, maybe a little older, I ran away from home too." He heard her shift position, paying closer attention now. "My father, he had a drinking problem, and when he drank, he got angry, real angry. And my mother at me and my little sister. One night, after he hit my mother so hard she couldn't get up for a while, I decided I'd had enough. I packed a bag and just left." Marcus pulled out one of the sandwiches and unwrapped it slowly, the crinkling paper loud and the forest quiet. "I made it 2 days on my own. Thought I was pretty tough, but I got hungry and cold and scared. A police officer found me sleeping in a park. Nice man named Officer Martinez. He bought me a burger and asked me what was wrong. He took a bite of the sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. You know what he told me? He said, 'Son, running away from the problem doesn't make it go away. But sometimes running away gives you time to figure out a better solution.'" Sarah had crept forward slightly, though she probably wasn't aware of it. Marcus could see more of her now, the careful way she moved as if her ribs hurt, the defensive position of her shoulders, the way she kept glancing around, checking escape routes. "Officer Martinez helped me figure out that better solution," Marcus continued. "Turned out there were people whose job it was to help kids like me. Social workers, counselors, people who knew how to make the bad stuff stop." He set down the half-eaten sandwich and looked directly at Sarah for the first time since she had emerged. I'm guessing you ran away because someone was hurting you, Sarah. And I'm guessing you're scared that if anyone finds you, they'll make you go back to whoever was doing the hurting. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back fiercely. She nodded once, a tiny movement that confirmed Marcus's worst fears. Well, here's the thing, Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm. I'm not going to make you go anywhere you don't want to go, but I'm going to help you figure out a better solution than living in a log in the middle of the forest. He reached into his backpack again and pulled out his cell phone. Sarah immediately tensed, ready to bolt back into her hiding place. I'm not calling anyone yet, Marcus said quickly, holding up his free hand in a peaceful gesture. But I want you to know that when I do call someone, it's going to be people whose job it is to keep kids safe. Not people whose job it is to send you back to wherever you came from, no questions asked. Sarah watched him warily as he set the phone down on the ground, far enough away that he couldn't grab it quickly. But first, Marcus said, I think you need some real food, some clean clothes, and maybe a doctor to look at those bruises. And you need to know that you're not alone in this anymore. He stood up slowly and shouldered his backpack. There's a cabin about a mile from here. It belongs to my sister Rosa. She's a veterinarian, which means she's good at taking care of things that are hurt. It's got running water, a kitchen, and a bathroom. More importantly, it's got locks on all the doors, and Rosa keeps a shotgun by her bed. Marcus paused, letting that information sink in. I'm going to walk over there now and talk to Rosa. I'm going to tell her about you, and we're going to figure out the best way to help you. You can follow me if you want to, or you can stay here, or you can go anywhere else you think is safer. He picked up his rifle and started to turn away, then stopped. But Sarah, if anyone comes looking for you, police, social workers, anyone, and they ask where you've been or who you've been with, you tell them you've been with me. Marcus Rodriguez. You tell them I've been taking care of you, and that I said it was okay for you to be here. Sarah stared at him, confusion and hope warring in her dark eyes. Why? She whispered. Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile he had felt in weeks. Because sometimes, sweetheart, people need someone to stand between them and the bad things in the world. And today, I guess I'm your someone. He began walking toward the cabin, his boots crunching softly on the forest floor. Behind him, he heard the rustling of movement, and after a few minutes, the soft sound of bare feet following at a safe distance. Rosa Martinez Rodriguez had been expecting her brother to show up eventually that morning, probably with stories about the deer that got away or complaints about the other hunters making too much noise. She had not been expecting him to arrive with a traumatized child who looked like she had been living in the wild. Marcus, she said quietly, watching through the cabin window as her brother approached with a small figure trailing behind him like a cautious shadow. What have you gotten yourself into? Rosa was 48, 5 years younger than Marcus, with the same patient brown eyes, but a much more direct way of dealing with problems. 23 years as a veterinarian had taught her to assess injuries quickly and treat first, ask questions later. The child following Marcus was clearly injured, clearly frightened, and clearly in need of immediate care. She opened the cabin door before Marcus could knock. "Bring her in," she said simply. Marcus stopped at the porch steps and turned back to Sarah, who had frozen about 20 feet away. "This is my sister Rosa," he called to her. "She's the one I told you about. She's good people." Sarah looked at the cabin, a small, neat building with cheerful yellow curtains in the windows and a porch swing that spoke of safety and normalcy. She looked at Rosa, a compact woman with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and kind eyes that reminded her of her grandmother's. "You hungry, honey?" Rosa asked, her voice carrying the slight accent that Marcus had worked hard to lose over the years. "I was just making breakfast." Got plenty for one more. The smell of bacon and eggs drifted out from the cabin, and Sarah's stomach responded with an audible growl that made her flush with embarrassment. Come on, Marcus said gently. Just breakfast. Nothing more than that right now. Sarah took one step forward, then another. Each step was a choice, a decision to trust these strangers who claimed they wanted to help. When she reached the porch, Rosa held the door open wide, giving her plenty of space to enter without feeling trapped. Bathroom's right there, Rosa said, pointing to a door off the main room. Clean towels in the closet. I've got some clothes that might fit you. My daughter left some things here last time she visited. Sarah looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Go ahead, Rosa, and I will be right here. As soon as Sarah disappeared into the bathroom, and they heard the sound of running water, Rosa grabbed Marcus's arm and pulled him outside onto the porch. Tell me, she said simply. Marcus told her everything. Finding Sarah in the log den, the bruises, the 5 days alone in the forest, the obvious signs that she was running from abuse rather than toward adventure. We have to call someone, Rosa said when he finished. Child Protective Services, the police, someone. I know, Marcus said, but not yet. Look at her, Rosa. She's terrified that whoever we call is going to send her right back to whoever hurt her. She needs to trust us first, and she needs to believe that we're going to keep her safe, no matter what. Rosa studied her brother's face, seeing something there she hadn't seen in years. Purpose. Determination. The same look he used to get when they were kids, and he was protecting her from their father's drunken rages. Okay, she said finally, but not long, Marcus. That child needs medical attention, and she needs legal protection. We can't just keep her here like some kind of stray puppy. I know, Marcus repeated, but first we're going to show her what it feels like to be safe, maybe for the first time in her life. Inside the cabin, Sarah stood in front of the bathroom mirror, hardly recognizing herself. The face looking back at her was gaunt and dirty, with bruises in various stages of healing. She looked like the homeless kid she had seen on the streets downtown, the ones adults hurried past without making eye contact. But the bathroom was clean and warm, with soft towels that smelled like fabric softener and soap that didn't come from a gas station dispenser. There was shampoo and conditioner, and when she turned on the shower, the water came out hot and steady. For the first time in 5 days, Sarah allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she had found people who meant what they said about helping her. Outside, Marcus and Rosa could hear the shower running, and they exchanged a look that said everything that needed to be said. This child was staying with them until they could figure out how to keep her safe permanently. Neither of them knew that Sarah's stepfather was already looking for her, or that he had connections that would make finding her much easier than they imagined. Neither of them knew that by helping Sarah, they were putting themselves directly in the path of a man who had already proven he would do anything to keep his secrets hidden. All they knew was that a frightened child needed their help, and that sometimes doing the right thing was more important than doing the safe thing. The shower water had turned brown as it circled the drain, carrying away 5 days of forest dirt, dried tears, and the physical evidence of Sarah's survival. When she finally emerged from the bathroom, clean and wearing Rosa's daughter's old clothes, a soft blue sweater and jeans that were only slightly too big, she looked younger and more vulnerable than she had in the forest. Rosa had prepared a breakfast that could feed a small army. Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, fresh fruit, and orange juice. Sarah stared at the spread with wide eyes, as if she couldn't quite believe it was real. Sit anywhere you want, Rosa said, settling into a chair that gave Sarah a clear view of both the front door and the back exit. She had noticed how the girls' eyes constantly tracked escape routes. Sarah chose a seat at the end of the table, her back to the wall. She ate slowly at first, taking small bites as if testing whether the food was safe. Then, as hunger overcame caution, she began to eat with the desperate efficiency of someone who hadn't had a real meal in days. Marcus watched her carefully, noting the way she unconsciously protected her plate with her arm, the way she kept glancing up to make sure no one was going to take the food away from her. These were learned behaviors, survival instincts developed by a child who had been hungry before. "Sarah," Rosa said gently when the girl had eaten enough to take the edge off her hunger, "I'm a doctor for animals, but I know enough about people to see that you're hurt. Would you let me take a look at those bruises?" Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her ribs, confirming Rosa's suspicion that the injuries extended beyond what was visible. "I'm okay," she said automatically. "I'm sure you are," Rosa agreed. "You're one of the toughest kids I've ever met, to survive 5 days out there on your own. But tough doesn't mean you have to hurt when you don't need to. I've got some medicine that could help with the pain, and I want to make sure nothing's broken." Sarah looked at Marcus, seeking his opinion. "Rosa's helped me plenty of times when I've gotten banged up on construction sites," he said. "She's got gentle hands." After a long moment, Sarah nodded slightly. Rosa led her to the cabin's small guest bedroom, where she kept a basic first aid kit that was more comprehensive than most people's due to her veterinary training. The examination was worse than Rosa had expected. The bruises on Sarah's arms and torso were extensive and in various stages of healing, suggesting ongoing abuse rather than a single incident. There were finger-shaped marks on her upper arms, the kind left by someone gripping too hard. Most concerning were the partially healed injuries to her ribs, which Rosa suspected were cracked though not broken. "Honey," Rosa said carefully as she cleaned a cut on Sarah's shoulder, "these injuries didn't come from falling down or playing too rough. Someone did this to you, didn't they?" Sarah's whole body tensed. "I can't," she whispered. "He said if I ever told anyone, he would—" She stopped, clamping her mouth shut. "He would what, sweetheart?" "He would hurt my mom worse than he hurt me. And he said nobody would believe me anyway, because he's important and I'm just a kid." The words came out in a rush, as if they had been bottled up for too long. Rosa felt her jaw clench with anger, but she kept her voice steady and calm. "Important how? He's a police lieutenant, Lieutenant David Morrison. He married my mom 2 years ago after my dad died." Sarah's voice was flat, emotionless, as if she was reciting facts about someone else's life. "At first he was nice to both of us, but then he started drinking more and getting angry about stupid things. And when Mom started talking about maybe they should get counseling or something, he got really mad." Rosa exchanged a look with Marcus, who had been standing quietly in the doorway. A police lieutenant. That explained why Sarah was so terrified of the authorities, and it made their situation much more complicated. "How long has he been hurting you?" Rosa asked. "About 6 months. It started small, grabbing my arm too hard when he was mad, pushing me around a little. But it got worse. Last week, when I accidentally broke one of his beer bottles, he hit me so hard I saw stars. And then he said if I ever made him look bad in front of his friends again, he would make sure I regretted it." Sarah's voice remained steady, but tears were streaming down her face now. "The night I ran away, he came home really drunk and really angry about something that happened at work. He started hitting my mom, and when I tried to get between them, he threw me against the wall so hard that I heard something crack." Rosa gently palpated Sarah's ribs, finding the tender spots where the bones had been impacted. "That's when you decided to run?" "Mom was unconscious, and he passed out in his chair. I took some money from Mom's purse and just left. I thought if I wasn't there, maybe he wouldn't hurt her anymore. Maybe she would be brave enough to leave him if she didn't have to worry about protecting me too." Marcus stepped into the room, his face carefully controlled, but his hands clenched into fists. Sarah, where do you think your mom is right now? I don't know, Sarah admitted, fresh tears starting. I've been so scared that he might have really hurt her this time, but I was too scared to call home and check. What if he answered? What if he found out where I was calling from? Rosa finished wrapping Sarah's ribs with an elastic bandage and handed her a clean tissue. We're going to figure this out, she promised. But first, you need to understand something. What Lieutenant Morrison did to you and your mother is a crime. It doesn't matter that he's a police officer. It doesn't matter that he's your stepfather. Nobody has the right to hurt you like that. But who's going to believe me? Sarah asked, the despair in her voice breaking both adults' hearts. He's a lieutenant. He has friends everywhere. And I'm just some kid who ran away from home. You're not just some kid, Marcus said firmly. You're a brave, smart girl who made an incredibly difficult decision to protect herself and possibly her mother. And you're not alone anymore. Over the next few hours, Rosa and Marcus worked together to gather information and develop a plan. Rosa used her computer to research domestic violence resources, while Marcus made quiet phone calls to people he trusted. What they learned was both encouraging and terrifying. The encouraging part was that there were systems in place to help children in Sarah's situation. There were specially trained social workers, victim advocates, and even police officers who specialized in domestic violence cases involving other law enforcement officers. The terrifying part was learning more about Lieutenant David Morrison himself. Marcus's contact in the sheriff's department, a man named Deputy Johnson who had worked construction with Marcus before joining law enforcement, was willing to share some unofficial information. Morrison's got a reputation, Johnson told Marcus quietly over the phone. Nothing anyone's been able to prove, but there have been whispers. His first wife left him suddenly about 3 years ago, moved out of state with their kids. There was talk that she was scared of him, but she never filed any complaints. And there have been a couple of domestic disturbance calls to his current address, but somehow those reports always got buried or dismissed. So he's been getting away with this for years? Probably. And Marcus? Word is that he's been asking around about a missing stepdaughter. Officially, it's just a concerned parent looking for a runaway kid. But the way he's been pushing for information, calling in favors, using department resources, it feels more like a man trying to cover his tracks than a father worried about his child's safety. Marcus felt his stomach drop. How long before he figures out where she is? Hard to say, but Morrison's got connections throughout the county, and he knows how to work the system. If Sarah's been spotted anywhere, if anyone's called in a tip about a missing kid, he's going to hear about it. You need to be very careful about who you trust with this. After hanging up, Marcus shared the conversation with Rosa, who had been researching domestic violence protocols on her laptop. I found someone, Rosa said, turning the screen so Marcus could see. Detective Lisa Park with the State Bureau of Investigation. She specializes in cases involving law enforcement officers as perpetrators. Her unit was created specifically because local departments can't always be trusted to investigate their own. Marcus read the information on the screen. Detective Park had an impressive record of successful prosecutions, including several cases where police officers had been convicted of domestic violence. More importantly, her unit operated independently of local law enforcement. But Rosa continued, even if we call Detective Park, Sarah's going to have to tell her story. She's going to have to relive all of this in detail, probably multiple times. And there's going to be a legal process that could take months. And in the meantime, Sarah needs somewhere safe to stay. The state has emergency foster care programs, but those would require going through the local Child Protective Services office. Given Morrison's connections, that might not be the safest option. They were interrupted by a soft knock on the bedroom door. Sarah appeared, having changed back in her clean clothes. The shower and food and medical attention had made a remarkable difference in her appearance, but her eyes were still wary. "I heard you talking," she said quietly. "You're trying to figure out what to do with me." Marcus and Rosa exchanged a look. They had agreed to be completely honest with Sarah, to treat her as a partner in figuring out her situation rather than just a problem to be solved. Marcus admitted. "We want to help you, Sarah, but we also want to make sure we do it in a way that actually keeps you safe. Your stepfather is looking for you, and he's using his police connections to do it." Sarah's face paled, but she didn't seem surprised. "I knew he would. He hates losing control of things. How long do you think I have before he finds me here?" "We don't know," Rosa said honestly. "Maybe days, maybe weeks. But we're not going to let him take you back to that house. We found someone who might be able to help, a state detective who specializes in cases like yours. But it's going to mean telling your story to strangers, probably going to court, possibly being placed in foster care while everything gets sorted out. And there's no guarantee that Morrison will be convicted, even if we can prove what he did." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. When she spoke again, her voice was steady but sad. "What about my mom? Even if I'm safe, he's still going to hurt her. Maybe worse now that I'm gone, and he's angry about it." This was the question that had been haunting Marcus and Rosa as well. Protecting Sarah was only half the problem. Rebecca Chun was also in danger, possibly more so now that her daughter had escaped, and Morrison knew his abuse might be exposed. "We think," Rosa said carefully, "that the best way to protect your mother is to get Morrison arrested and charged. As long as he's free and in that house, she's in danger. But if we can build a strong case against him, get him removed from the home and facing serious criminal charges, then she'll be safer. And if we can't build a strong case..." Marcus leaned forward in his chair. "Sarah, I want you to know something. Whatever happens with the legal stuff, whatever happens with Detective Park or the courts or any of that, you are not going back to that house. Rosa, and I won't let that happen. But you're not my family. You can't just decide to keep me." "Maybe not legally," Rosa said, "but there are ways to make it work. Emergency guardianship, kinship care programs, even informal arrangements while the legal stuff gets sorted out. The point is, you have choices now. You're not trapped anymore." Sarah looked back and forth between them. These two strangers who were offering her something she had almost given up believing in: safety, protection, and the promise that adults could be trusted to keep their word. "There's something else," she said finally. "Something I didn't tell you before." Marcus and Rosa waited. "The night I left, after Morrison threw me against the wall, I heard him on the phone with someone. He was really drunk and really angry, and he was talking about some kind of investigation at work. Something about missing evidence and someone getting too close to the truth." Sarah took a shaky breath. "He said if certain people didn't back off, he was going to have to handle the situation permanently." And then he laughed, but it was a scary laugh, like he was talking about hurting someone. Rosa felt her blood run cold. "Did he mention any names?" "Just one. He kept saying that bitch Park needed to mind her own business or she was going to end up like Officer Williams." Marcus and Rosa stared at each other. Detective Lisa Park, the same Detective Park they had been planning to call for help. "Sarah," Marcus said urgently, "who is Officer Williams?" "I don't know. But a few weeks ago, there was something on the news about a police officer who died in a car accident. Mom was watching it, and when Morrison came home, he seemed really happy about it. He said something about how sometimes problems just solve themselves." Rosa was already turning back to her computer, searching for recent news about police officer deaths in the area. What she found made her stomach lurch. Officer Maria Williams, she read aloud. 28 years old, 5-year veteran of the force. Died 3 weeks ago when her car went off the road during a rainstorm. She was reportedly investigating discrepancies in evidence storage procedures. Marcus felt the pieces clicking together in his mind. Internal affairs. Williams was investigating Morrison for evidence tampering, and Park is continuing that investigation. Morrison is facing more than just domestic violence charges. He's looking at corruption charges, maybe even murder if Williams's death wasn't an accident. Which means, Rosa said grimly, that he's not just trying to find Sarah to keep his abuse secret. He's trying to find her because she overheard him essentially confessing to murder. Sarah had gone very pale. He really killed someone? We don't know for sure, Marcus said gently. But it's starting to look like your stepfather is in much deeper trouble than we thought, which makes him much more dangerous. But it also means that Detective Park is going to be very interested in what you have to tell her. Are we still going to call her? Sarah asked. Even though Morrison was talking about hurting her, Rosa closed her laptop and looked directly at Sarah. Sweetheart, I think Detective Park is the only person who can protect all of us now. Morrison isn't just a wife-beater anymore. He's potentially a killer who's trying to cover his tracks. We're in over our heads. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, peering out at the forest that had seemed so peaceful just that morning. We need to call Detective Park tonight, and we need to assume that Morrison is going to find us soon, maybe within the next day or two. So what do we do? Sarah asked. We get you somewhere safe before we make that call, Rosa said. I have a friend who runs a women's shelter about 2 hours from here. It's designed to be completely hidden from abusive partners, even ones with law enforcement connections. You can stay there while Detective Park begins her investigation. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then asked the question that had been weighing on her heart since she left home. Will you try to find out if my mom is okay? Yes, Marcus promised. We'll find out about your mother, and we'll make sure she gets help too. As evening fell over the forest, the three of them worked together to pack a bag for Sarah and plan their next moves. None of them slept much that night, taking turns keeping watch at the windows and listening for the sound of cars on the gravel road that led to the cabin. They didn't know that Morrison had already traced Sarah's general location through a combination of police resources and street cameras. They didn't know that he was currently sitting in his patrol car at the end of their road, waiting for dawn to make his move. What they did know was that by morning, everything would change. The question was whether they could stay one step ahead of a man who had already proven he would kill to protect his secrets. Dawn was still an hour away when Marcus heard the first sound that didn't belong in the forest, the soft crunch of gravel under tires, moving slowly down the access road toward Rosa's cabin. He had been sitting by the window since 4 a.m, Rosa's shotgun across his lap, watching for exactly this moment. Rosa, he whispered urgently, moving quickly to wake his sister. He's here. Rosa was awake instantly, years of veterinary emergencies having trained her to go from sleep to full alertness in seconds. How many vehicles? Just one, I think. But he's moving careful-like, trying not to make noise. They had planned for this possibility. Sarah was already dressed and had a backpack with essentials ready to go. The plan was simple. If Morrison found them, Rosa would take Sarah out the back exit and through the forest to where Marcus had hidden his truck on a logging road half a mile away. Marcus would stay behind to delay Morrison, giving them time to escape. Sarah, Rosa whispered, gently shaking the girl awake. It's time to go. Sarah's eyes snapped open immediately. Like Marcus, she had learned to wake up ready for danger. He found us. We think so. Remember the plan. You stay close to Rosa, you do exactly what she says, and you don't look back no matter what you hear. Sarah nodded, but Marcus could see the fear in her eyes. Not fear for herself, but fear for him. What if he hurts you? I'm not planning on letting him get that close, Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. Now go. Rosa and Sarah slipped out the cabin's back door and disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness. Marcus positioned himself at the front window where he could see the driveway while remaining hidden behind the curtains. The vehicle, a dark SUV that could have been an unmarked police car, had stopped about 50 yards away, partially hidden behind a stand of pine trees. For several minutes, nothing happened. Morrison was being smart, taking time to assess the situation, maybe checking for escape routes or additional vehicles. Marcus used the time to call Detective Park's emergency number, the one Rosa had found on the state website. Detective Park, this is Marcus Rodriguez. We spoke yesterday about the Sarah Chun case. Marcus kept his voice low, hoping it wouldn't carry to whoever was in the SUV. Mr. Rodriguez, it's 5 in the morning. Is everything all right? No, ma'am, it's not. Lieutenant Morrison found us. He's outside right now, and I think he's planning to take Sarah by force. My sister is getting her out of here, but I need backup. There was a pause, then Detective Park's voice became sharp and professional. What's your exact location? Marcus gave her the address and GPS coordinates. How long before you can get here? I'm about 40 minutes away, but I can have local units there in 10 minutes. Local units might be compromised, Marcus said urgently. Morrison has connections throughout the county sheriff's department. I understand. I'm calling the state police directly. Stay on the line with me and keep me updated on what's happening. Marcus was about to respond when he saw movement from the SUV. A figure in a dark jacket was approaching the cabin, moving from tree to tree with the practiced stealth of someone with tactical training. Even in the dim light, Marcus could see the gun in the man's hand. He's coming up to the house armed, Marcus whispered into the phone. Definitely Morrison. Mr. Rodriguez, do not engage him. Lock the doors, stay hidden, and wait for backup. But even as Detective Park spoke, Marcus heard the sound of footsteps on the cabin's front porch. Morrison wasn't bothering with stealth anymore. Marcus Rodriguez. Morrison's voice carried clearly through the cabin's thin walls. I know you're in there, and I know you have my stepdaughter. You've got 30 seconds to send her out, or this is going to get very unpleasant for everyone involved. Marcus stayed silent, hoping Morrison would assume the cabin was empty. I'm a police lieutenant, Rodriguez. I've got legal authority to search this premises for a missing child. If you're harboring a runaway, you're committing a felony. Still no response from Marcus, who was relaying everything he heard to Detective Park through his phone's microphone. Morrison's voice changed, becoming harder and more threatening. Or maybe you know exactly why Sarah ran away, and you think you're some kind of hero protecting her. Is that it, Rodriguez? You think you're going to save the poor little girl from her mean stepfather? Marcus heard footsteps moving around the cabin, Morrison checking windows and looking for other entrances. Here's what you don't understand, Rodriguez. Sarah is a troubled kid who makes up stories for attention. Always has been. Her mother, and I've been very patient with her behavior problems, but she's gotten completely out of control lately. Running away, telling lies about her family. Classic attention-seeking behavior. The footsteps stopped at the back door, and Marcus heard the sound of the handle being tested. Rosa had locked it, but the cabin's doors weren't designed to keep out someone who really wanted to get in. The thing is, Morrison continued, his voice now coming from directly outside the back door. Sarah witnessed something she shouldn't have witnessed. And she's too young and too stupid to understand that some things need to stay private for everyone's safety. There was a sound of splintering wood as Morrison forced the back door. Marcus realized that Rosa and Sarah might not have gotten far enough away yet. They needed more time. "Morrison," Marcus called out, hoping to keep the man's attention focused on him instead of pursuing Rosa and Sarah. "I'm armed, and I've already called for backup. State police are on their way." Morrison laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "State police? You mean Detective Park?" "Yeah, I figure she might be involved in this. That woman has been a problem for a long time, sticking her nose into business that doesn't concern her." Marcus heard Morrison moving through the cabin, checking rooms methodically. The man was clearly experienced in building searches. "You know what happened to the last person who tried to cause problems for me? Rodriguez? Officer Williams? She had an unfortunate accident on a rainy night. Terrible thing, really. Lost control of her car on a curve, went right off the road into the river." Marcus felt his blood run cold. Morrison was essentially confessing to murder, and he was doing it because he planned to make sure Marcus never got the chance to repeat it to anyone. "But I'm a fair man," Morrison continued, his voice getting closer to Marcus's hiding spot. "You send Sarah out to me right now, and you can walk away from this. Go back to your construction job. Forget you ever met a troubled little girl who makes up stories. Everyone wins. And if I don't..." Morrison appeared in the doorway to the main room, his service weapon drawn, and pointed at Marcus. In the dim morning light filtering through the windows, Marcus could see that this was a man who had gone far past the point of rational thinking. Morrison's eyes had the flat, cold look of someone who had already decided to kill. "If you don't," Morrison said calmly, "then you're going to have an unfortunate accident too. Maybe a hunting accident. Tragic mistake, really. City man not familiar with proper gun safety. These things happen all the time." Marcus kept Rosa's shotgun pointed at Morrison, though he knew he was at a disadvantage. Morrison had better training, better position, and nothing left to lose. "Sarah's not here," Marcus said. "Even if I wanted to give her to you, I can't." "Then where is she?" "Safe. Somewhere you'll never find her." Morrison's face twisted with rage. "You have no idea what you're messing with, Rodriguez. Sarah heard things, saw things that could destroy a lot of people. Important people. People who won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens them." "You mean your friends in the evidence room? The ones who helped you cover up whatever Williams was investigating?" Morrison's expression showed genuine surprise that Marcus knew so much. "You've been busy, haven't you? Too busy for your own good." The sound of sirens in the distance made both men freeze. Morrison's head tilted as he listened, trying to determine how far away the vehicles were and how much time he had left. "Looks like your backup is coming," Morrison said. "Unfortunately, they're going to find a very tragic scene when they get here. A dangerous fugitive who attacked a police officer, forcing me to use lethal force in self-defense." Marcus saw Morrison's finger tighten on the trigger and knew he was out of time. But before either man could fire, a new voice cut through the tension. "Lieutenant Morrison, this is Detective Lisa Park with the State Bureau of Investigation. Put your weapon down immediately." Morrison spun toward the sound, giving Marcus a precious second to dive behind the couch. Through the window, Marcus could see Detective Park approaching the cabin with her own weapon drawn, flanked by 2 state police officers. "Detective Park," Morrison called out, his voice suddenly taking on a professional, authoritative tone. "Thank God you're here. I've been tracking a dangerous suspect who kidnapped my stepdaughter. He's armed and has been making threats. Sir, I need you to put your weapon down and step outside so we can sort this out safely. Detective, this man has been harboring a runaway child and interfering with a police investigation. I was attempting to safely apprehend him when he pulled a gun on me. Marcus could hear the lie in Morrison's voice, but had to admit the man was good at it. If Detective Park didn't already know the truth about the situation, she might believe Morrison's version of events. Lieutenant Morrison, Detective Park's voice was steady and professional. I need you to know that we have Sarah Chun in protective custody, and she has provided us with a detailed statement about the abuse she suffered in your home. We also have a witness who overheard you making threats against Officer Williams. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus could almost hear Morrison's mind racing, trying to figure out how much Detective Park actually knew and what his options were. Sir, Detective Park continued, you are currently under investigation for domestic violence, evidence tampering, and possibly murder. Anything you do right now is only going to make your situation worse. When Morrison finally spoke, all pretense of innocence was gone from his voice. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Park. This goes way beyond one dirty cop and his family problems. Then, help us understand. Put down your weapon and come outside. Let's talk about it. Instead of responding to Detective Park, Morrison turned back toward Marcus's hiding place behind the couch. This is all your fault, Rodriguez. Sarah would have kept her mouth shut if you hadn't filled her head with ideas about fighting back. Marcus saw Morrison raising his gun again and knew he was about to die. But before Morrison could fire, the cabin's front door exploded inward as state police officers breached the entrance. In the chaos that followed, shouting voices, flashlights cutting through the dim morning light, the sound of boots on wooden floors, Marcus heard Detective Park's voice cutting through everything else. David Morrison, you're under arrest for domestic violence, child abuse, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy in the murder of Officer Maria Williams. The arrest wasn't clean or easy. Morrison fought, tried to run, and at one point attempted to grab Marcus as a hostage. But in the end, he was overwhelmed by superior numbers and better tactics. As the state police officers wrestled him to the ground and cuffed him, Morrison was still shouting threats and accusations. You don't know what you're starting, Park. There are other people involved, people with more power than you can imagine. They're not going to let this stand. Detective Park knelt down beside Morrison as the officers prepared to transport him. Then, I guess we'll have to see who has more power, your friends or the law. As Morrison was loaded into a state police vehicle, Detective Park approached Marcus, who was sitting on the cabin's front steps, trying to process everything that had just happened. Mr. Rodriguez, are you injured? No, ma'am. Shaken up, but not hurt. Marcus looked toward the forest where Rosa and Sarah had disappeared. What about them? Are they safe? Your sister called me 20 minutes ago. They made it to my vehicle safely, and Sarah is currently with specially trained victim advocates who will help prepare her for the legal proceedings ahead. Marcus felt a weight lift off his shoulders that he hadn't even realized he was carrying. So, it's over. Detective Park's expression was grim. Morrison's arrest is just the beginning. Based on what Sarah has told us and what we overheard him say to you this morning, we believe there's a larger conspiracy involving evidence tampering, drug seizures, and possibly other murders. Morrison wasn't working alone, meaning Sarah is still in danger, meaning all of you are still in danger until we can identify and arrest Morrison's accomplices. Sarah is going into protective custody, and I'd strongly recommend that you and your sister consider the same thing, at least temporarily. Marcus thought about his quiet life, his weekends in the forest, his construction job that didn't require him to think about corrupt cops or murdered police officers. A week ago, his biggest worry was whether it would rain on the weekend and ruin his hunting plans. Detective Park, he said finally, when you were a kid, did anyone ever tell you that sometimes doing the right thing means everything else in your life goes sideways? She smiled, the first genuine warmth he had seen from her since this whole thing started. My father told me that every day of my life. He also told me that the people who do the right thing when it's hard are the ones who make it possible for everyone else to sleep safely at night. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was a police officer for 30 years. Never took a bribe. Never looked the other way when his partners crossed the line. Never let the politics of the job compromise his integrity. He died knowing he had made a difference. Marcus stood up and looked out at the forest one more time, knowing it would be a while before he could come back here safely. So what happens now? Now we build a case that will put Morrison and his accomplices away for life. We make sure Sarah gets the counseling and support she needs to heal for what she's been through. We help her mother get somewhere safe and start over. And we make sure that what happened to Officer Williams never happens to anyone else. Detective Park handed Marcus a card with her contact information. You saved that little girl's life, Mr. Rodriguez. Not just by protecting her from Morrison, but by being the first adult she encountered who actually listened to her and believed her. That's going to make all the difference in her recovery. As the state police vehicles pulled away with Morrison in custody, Marcus saw Rosa and Sarah emerging from the forest. Sarah ran to him, and for the first time since he had found her in the fallen log den, she looked like what she was, a 12-year-old girl who had finally found adults she could trust. Is it really over? Sarah asked, the same question Marcus had posed to Detective Park. The scary part is over, Rosa said, putting her arm around both Sarah and Marcus. But the healing part is just beginning. 6 months later, Marcus received a letter with a return address he didn't recognize. Inside was a photo of Sarah at what appeared to be a school science fair, holding a trophy and smiling broadly. She looked healthy and happy, with clear eyes and the kind of genuine smile that only came from feeling truly safe. The letter was brief. Dear Marcus and Rosa, I wanted you to know that I won first place in the regional science fair with my project about forest ecosystems and wildlife survival. I think I learned more about survival that week in the forest than most people learn in a lifetime. Morrison was sentenced to life in prison without parole. 3 other police officers were also convicted. Detective Park says there might be more arrests coming. Mom is doing great. We live in a different state now, and she's getting counseling. She wants me to tell you both thank you for saving both of us. I'm going to be a forest ranger when I grow up, or maybe a detective like Detective Park. I want to help people the way you helped me. The woods aren't scary to me anymore. I know now that the most dangerous predators don't live in the forest. They live in houses where children are supposed to be safe. But I also know that there are people like you who will stand between the predators and the children, even when they don't know each other's names. If they ask, I'll always say I was with you. Love, Sarah. Marcus folded the letter carefully and put it in his wallet next to his hunting license and a photo of his sister. Then he picked up his rifle and headed out to the forest where the fallen log den still stood like a monument to the day his life changed forever. Sometimes the most important hunting trips are the ones where you don't shoot anything, but instead find something worth protecting. And sometimes the best way to save someone is simply to say, if they ask, say you're with me.